My parents, of course, my parents were the greatest influence on me. My mother was extraordinarily strict, but she was great. She was a stickler for telling the truth. I remember being smacked very badly, cane, jumping from one sofa to the other and one bed from the other, and she following me with a cane and smacking me because I had spoken a lie and had not admitted to it. But I think many of her qualities I have imbibed. Besides her immense honesty and her straightforwardness and her humility, she came from a rather very rich family. But my father came from a comparatively poor family. But amazingly, she refused any help from her parents. Even though they insisted on it, she refused to take a single naya paisa. In those days, pies and annas from them at all. And was fiercely independent from that. She was a thrifty person also, because they were not easy days. My father being a general practitioner, I remember even as a young boy, used to come home around 11 and 12 at night. And I would be often waiting for him to come before I went to sleep. As I said, she was a thrifty person. I very vaguely remember her putting 400 pieces, 800 pieces, rupee pieces together separately like that, saving money like that. I don't think I can ever forget that. My father was the kindest person in the world. He never lifted a hand on me. However mischievous I was, he never ever lifted a hand on me. I don't think he even really scolded me at any time. Basically, therefore, he was so busy that it was my mother, who was dominating the house. On the dining table, the talk would always come, usually, to some person who was very ill. And he would talk about, so and so being very ill and I'm helpless, because there's no medicine for that. I particularly remember, apparently a young girl with pyogenic meningitis, and he said, I have only MNB 693, it was a sulfur based, which is utterly useless, and how desolate he was when this poor girl died. So, you see, being exposed to these talks very often on the dining table. I somehow decided to become a doctor ever since I was sick, and remember, ever since I was 5 years old or 6 years old, I said, I'm going to become a doctor. I'm going to become like my dad, a doctor, looking after patients. He had only poor patients. Amazing. He was at Lower Parel, it was a mill area, and they were all patients from the mills, poor people at that time. Lower Parel area was very, 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 very poor. And I very often used to go up to this dispensary, and I remember he had a book, and in the book he would have names of patients who owed him a lot of money, and they were written in alphabetical order. So I well remember many times, not once or twice, I grew older and I used to go there. The fellow would come, the patient would come, and my dad would say, "Wait, you have to pay me 150 rupees the whole year, you have not paid me." So he said, "Saab kya karega, bilkul paisa nahi hai." And he would put a scratch to that. So this is how it was. And I well remember, I must have been 9, maybe 11 or 12 years old. He said, "You want to give an intravenous injection?" I said, "Yes, I would love to give an intravenous injection." So I said, "Here, go ahead, see, I'm watching how you do it." There were these bhaiyas who had veins which were like pipes, absolutely. So I think even a fellow 7-year-old would know where to put the needle. So I well remember doing that at a very, very young age. So that's what my parents were. Tremendous influence, as I said, from my mother and from my father in different ways. I don't know. I wonder if I can think of anything else, as with regard to my. Yes, my mother was rather very strict, as I said, as far as discipline went. And for example, even food-wise, during the mango season, I couldn't eat more than one mango a day. So in the vacations, I would escape to my rich grandmother's house, who was very, very fond of me. I was a pet, absolutely. Because she had no compunction in allowing me to eat 3 mangoes for breakfast, 3 mangoes for lunch, and 3 mangoes for dinner. So I well remember that as well. My teachers in school, they were very good. I went to St. Mary's. First it was on the Cambridge side, and then my mother said, no, you must save 1 year to go to the SSC side. The Cambridge side is probably the best school that ever was in the city. Besides discipline, besides the teaching, it was an excellent school in every way. It was the formative years of my life, and I started right from 5 years old. And we had some great teachers, even in those 5 years, great teachers, even in the preliminary standards, and later on, right up to the 4th standard, superb teachers. English, mathematics, name it, Hindi, etc. There used to be corporal punishment in those days. And I was an extremely mischievous child, because I couldn't do the mischief at home, so I used to take it out of the school. I remember one incident, where I had a firecracker placed under the seat of the teacher, a long fuse, and as she walked in, I did it beautifully timed. As soon as she sat, the firecracker went off and she flew 1-footed behind me. Of course, there was pandemonium, and she insisted that she would punish the whole class and have them caned, if the culprit didn't own up. So naturally, I had to own up. I said, I'm very sorry, it was my fault. I don't know why I did it, but I'm very sorry. That's not enough. That's not enough, she said. She sent me to the headmaster. Now, headmaster was a rather savage Jesuit priest, a Spanish priest. So I went trembling, I remember, to him, and he said, boy, shut that window. So I, trembling, because you had huge windows in those days, shut the window. Come here, I went, take off your pants. In those days, boys at that age never wore underpants. Now they do, but they didn't at that time. I took my pants, and he gave me 6 whacks on my bottom. I couldn't sit for about 2 weeks. Wheels, that was how it was. I'll never forget that, but it was all in the game. It was a remarkable school because it was a remarkably egalitarian school. That's what I loved about it. You either had to be a super sportsman in that school for the boys to say, he's great, really respect, or a super scholar, who was so scholarly that let him be. We won't bother him. Let him be. Just let him be. That sort of a school. And we had great fun at that time. When I switched to the SSC side, it was a culture shock. Because it was completely different. The filthiest words which I had never heard in my life came to my ears. I never knew the meaning, actually, frankly. Though I must have been, how much I went off in the 4th standard, which means I must have been about 10 years old or something like that. I never heard this. So what was I to do? I felt completely like a fish out of water. So I thought it was best to fall in line. So I started emulating them. One fine day, by mistake, I spoke those filthy words at home. And my mother heard it. My God, I got to thrashing. Never will you ever speak such words in your life. And I never did. That is another funny incident which I quite really thought. As I said, it was a culture shock, but again, it was nice because you mixed with a different strata altogether. You saw the whole world therefore in one side and then the other school on the other side. Then again there were good teachers, surprisingly there were good teachers, very good teachers. On both sides there were very good teachers. English particularly on the Cambridge side was excellent. They were all Jesuits and most of them were highly educated. Most of them, all of them spoke good English, though their native language was Spanish. It's amazing how one of them particularly, Dr. Shakespeare, was absolutely superb. We were enthralled when he spoke about English and English literature. So that's as far as school. I did well in school. I was not necessarily first. Off and on I would stand first. But I was, as I said, quite mischievous and quite engrossed in other things also. Cricket was my favorite game. I used to play cricket in school all the time, very often. And another thing of which I was very fond was elocution. We had elocution competitions in school. And I always used to take part in them. There was Jerson Dekona, and I'm sure you heard of him. He always used to beat me. Because why? He was big and strong. And we were like pipsqueaks, and he had a big voice, and we had squeaky voices, so there was no way in which we could beat him. So that was as far as elocution went, and as far as schooling went. And I did my examinations quite well without any problems. So I remained not at the very top, though occasionally right at the top, but within the first 3 ranks, I would usually be standing within the first 3 ranks. My examinations are quite alright. Matriculation was quite easy. Intermediate science, I must say, I did study hard because it was important to get through that exam with good marks to get into a good college. And I scored a first in data science. I was in the first class, and in those days, in the biology group in data science, there were not more than 4 or 5 people who would get a first class. It was impossible to get it. I got a first class there, and I wanted to join the JJ. Why? Because it was my father's college, and he was extremely fond of it. I must tell you an incident about my father. He was an excellent cricketer. He was the captain of the Branch Medical College team, and it has been the only time that Grant Medical College won the shield. Only time. And he told me about his final match. I don't know whether it was in Finston or whatever it was. He told me about his final match. In those days, by the way, my father's teachers were almost all, many of them were English. Many of them were English. And they used to all watch the cricket match. And he was the captain. He said he scored a scintillating 50. And he took 3 wonderful catches, 2 in the slip and 1 at mid-off. I will remember him telling me that. And they all clapped. And after this was over, the dean and the faculty there wanted him to join the, what was it called? The Indian Medical Service? Or what was
Yes.
it? It's called the Indian Medical Service or something. It's very attractive for him, the salary and all that was. And he had to say no because he had poor parents to support. Older parents, poor parents to support. And he said, no, I can't do that. I have to stay. It's funny enough, that in those days, the Parsis at the JJ hospital used to wear Parsi clothes. They used to come in their long clothes with their caps. And there was this incident again, I must tell you, it's a very nice incident, that this is the Hindu-Muslim riot time. And he and his friends were going by Goragari, because it's difficult to walk at that time, through that area, which was largely a Muslim area. And somehow or the other, they all attacked all of them and dragged them down. See? There were 4 of them. 3 of them ran in the right direction. But my father was caught and pinned to the ground. And there was a fellow who had a huge stone in his hand and was going to throw it on him. But for some reason or the other, he took out his stethoscope and showed it to him. At which point they said, let him go, he's a doctor, let him go. This is how it was in those days. Can you believe it? So that's another incident. Yes, as an undergraduate student and as and then of course my father said, no, you got very good marks. KM is supposed to be better. Why don't you join the KM? I did as my father said, oh, I joined the KM. Very lovely time we had, I must say. 5 years were great. Lots of fun, lots of work also. Again, we had excellent teachers in the first 2 years. I'll never forget Dr. Kopika, for example. He was superb in his anatomy. Kurulka was another doctor in anatomy, but rather dull. Physiology was so-so. There was Dr. Batliwala and there was Dr. Montero. I well remember that. But I did well in the first years. I got a scholarship. I can't quite remember. University scholarship, some scholarship. I don't know what it was for. But when we went into the hospital, I was in my element at that time. I loved the wards. I really loved the wards. And I loved medicine. From the beginning, I wasn't keen on surgery. I was always keen on medicine. I would never have made a good surgeon. I would have never made it. I was clumsy with my hands. So I was fascinated by my teachers. I loved them. Amazingly, I loved one of the surgical people most as far as his teaching went, and he was Dr. Balikar. I don't know if you ever, had you met him or you must not have met him, had you met him? He was superb. I can't tell you how superb he was. And his outpatients were absolutely excellent. He would have his registrars. I will remember, I forget now the name of this, one of his, Nimisha, cardiothoracic. He was his registrar. And Nimish would bring out a couple of patients from whom for Dr. Malika to do. He would analyze them, history, physical examination, meticulously performing a physical examination. And there were about 40 people around him. Meticulously, and he would discuss the case so beautifully, so logically that the impression that I had of how one has to think came from him more than from the physician. It literally came from him. And then I was very curious because usually the patient was admitted, what happened? And very often he was right. And not uncommonly he was wrong. But it didn't matter when he was wrong because the way he had analyzed the problem was something which was superb. And on the medical side, there were two teachers really who taught me. One was Dr. Vakil, Rustam Jar Vakil. He was a gentleman, thorough gentleman, if ever there was one. He used to take beautiful clinics in the cardiovascular system. And the other was a gentleman, a doctor called Dr. N.D. Patel. Nathubai Patel. He was an extraordinarily eccentric man. He would have all his staff wait at the portico. They had to wait. They had to open the door to come. And then only he would come. He was a short man, short, plump man. And the doors of the ward had to be closed till he came. And when he came only, the door would be open. About at least an hour before that, nobody could enter that ward because you never know when he was coming. But the beauty of the fellow was that he taught in a very unusual manner. I'll never forget that. You know, when he would decide to take a clinic, not always would he take, he would just come, walk and go away, but sometimes he would take a clinic which would last sometimes for 3 or 4 hours. He would decide to take the clinic, and the way he took it was rather remarkable. Whatever the case was, whatever it was, he would start by saying which was completely contrary to what was being. You see, it was as if this is a boy, he would say it's a girl, that's all the thing. And that's how the discussion would start. So it was extremely stimulating. Extremely stimulating. You didn't have to look at the book, you just had to see how why he's saying this, what he's saying this, what is he trying to get at before. He could be extremely rude, particularly to the girls around. But otherwise, I think he was a remarkable man. He was a remarkable teacher. So they were the two good medical teachers. Yes, I did very well in my exams, I must say. The final MBBS, there were people who used to read 24 hours a day. I used to fool around still, except the last 6 months of the final MBBS examination, when I read day and night, literally day and night. Because we had all 7 subjects together. I don't know if you had it in your days. No. We had all 7 subjects together, which was cool. Because, you know, if you had started, for example, with one subject, you would open that subject probably on the day of the examination, since you had so many things to read. But I did very well, you know. I didn't know, nobody expected it, but I stood first in final MBBS in almost all subjects except surgery. I took, I think, all the medals outside surgery. And it was nice. It was quite rewarding. And I got the maximum marks in medicine, I think, that ever was. Besides a distinction in medicine and ophthalmology and jurisprudence and what have you. But my medical marks in my practicals, clinicals, particularly, were extremely good. So there were quite a number of other boys who were doing medicine who were very studious and were scholars. There was Dr. Nair, for example. But I topped it quite easily and quite without any problems. So you had to choose. Naturally, went to the first unit, and in those days the first unit was Dr. Raghavan. Dr. Raghavan was a thorough gentleman. The amusing thing was, in those days, you know, we had not only looked at the medical side, medical wards, which is the male ward, we had the female ward, and we had the pediatrics, which means we looked after the children and the infants and the whatever neonates that came, that survived, you know, everyone, everything about which we knew really next to nothing. So it was a time really, you won't believe it, where Tuesday was the day when we had patients coming in the outpatient, and we had to admit them from there. And there were about 100 patients to see, at least 100 patients to see. And I used to screen about 30-40 patients, you know, in those days, particularly for tuberculosis. Such a radiation, you know, I got it almost. And then it was the same day that you had the outpatient was also the admission day. So there would be about 35 to 40 admissions on that day. And we had to handle all of that. And the handling meant not only the history, the examination, etc., written down for the next day's round, but the urine, stool, and the blood count of the ones who were really bad. All were done in the side room. We had to do it. We used to do it. And the next day, of course, was the round, which would last, say, from, you would come at about 9:30 or so, and it would last for about 1:32 or so. So we would be almost on our feet for 48 hours. Certainly no sleep on Tuesday at all. And no sleep on Wednesday also, probably, because we have to catch up on so many things. Thursday, sometime in the afternoon, maybe. So it was really grueling. But it was fun. I mean, no one objected. Just no one objected. And I had 2 great registrars. 3 good registrars. I met one was a Dr. Dave. He was a very sweet man. He then went to Ahmedabad. No, Baroda. He's no longer there. I treated him afterwards when he was quite here. There was one Dr. Nathubai Shah. He was the son of Dr. M.J. Shah, who was an honorary at the KVR. He was sitting for his MD. He was a lazy chap, laid back chap. So every day, Tuesday evening at 8 o'clock, he would stand at the porch of the door, just beneath the clock, and shout from there, "Parsi, but tu saru chhe na? Everything is all right." And half awake, I would say, "Saru chhe." You do a right about. Anyway, he was studying for his MD exam, so that's how it was. But the one whom I learned a fair amount of medicine from was another registrar called Dr. Ganeshan. I don't know if you've heard of him. Ganeshan. Dr. K.P. Ganeshan. He was N.D. Patel's favorite. You see, Ward 12, on one side was Raghavan, and the other side was Dr. N.D. So I used to very often go on rounds with Dr. N.D. Patel also. And he would almost take me as a houseman in those days, though I was working on the other side. Ganeshan was the registrar on the opposite side. So we were in frequent contact. I pestered him, learn as much as possible. He was very, very well read, very good, very practical, and a great help. So when my registrar was away and was studying, Ganeshan had already passed his MD examination. So I would very often ask his advice, now shall I do this, shall I do that? I can't but remember the first day of my housemanship in Ward 12. There was a huge man who came with fits. And I said, what shall I do? I have to do a lumbar puncture on this fellow. There was no passes, he just came with fits. And I knew that amongst the things you needed to do, but I had never done a lumbar puncture in my life. So there was this man in Ward 12 called Udwadia. He was, he used to urine, stools, they called him the lower category worker. He was indeed a great chap. So I asked Udwadia, क्या करूँ मैं अभी? फंस गया मैं तो पहला दिन में क्या करूँ? अरे कुछ नहीं, मैं समझाता हूँ आप चुप. Then Udwadia and two others, catches that man, bends him, and then I said, अभी साफ करो. So I used it. अभी क्या करूँ? वो ले उठा, नीडल लगाओ ना. तो नहीं लगा. अभी कहाँ लगाओ? बोला ये देखो तुम ना मालूम तो होगा ना कहाँ लगाना. I said L3, L4. L2, L3, L3, L4, L4, L5, L3, L4, I prefer to go there, I am safe there. अभी क्या करो? एकदम सीधा जाओ, सीधा जाओ, सीधा जाओ, सीधा जाओ, सीधा जाओ. कुछ आपको लगेगा कि अंदर के जगह है. Exactly as he said. That was just fortunate. I went first shot into that fat man and got to see us. What a marvelous thing it was. I told you I could congratulate myself 100 times. Well done, I told myself first time. Udwadia became my great pal. Udwadia. I once asked the mess fellow, can I get him for lunch? So he was outraged. He said, please don't do that. It was lots of problem. So I said, all right. And there was another fellow called Ghafoor also. He was, Udwadia was, Ghafoor was the head ward boy. He was a big older man. And we had a teacher who was fantastic. She was Sister Gamir, and the only one whom Indi Patel was afraid of was Sister Gamir. She was a thin Parsi woman, wiry woman, who would tell Indi Patel, no, I can't do that. This is not right. I will not do that. And Indi Patel would keep it out. He wouldn't say anything. So this is how it was, and it was the most enjoyable 6 months that I've ever had. Wonderful that I've had. I also remember my first encounter with death. Patient on the corner room. Is it alright if I speak? It's okay, you can edit anything and remove anything you want. This is a young man with severe diabetic ketoacidosis. And I sat with him day and night, literally, to try and control his sugar, which I did. But he got worse and worse, with a marked swelling over one eye. And I diagnosed it as a cavernous sinus thrombosis. And I think he died of that. They did an autopsy, but I don't think anybody opened the eyeball. Because it could well have been a mucormycosis. I'm sure if there had been a cavernous sinus thrombosis, they would have probably found that out when they opened the skull. But when I asked later on, did you open the orbit? They said no. I didn't know that it was mucormycosis then. I didn't make a guess. I didn't know. But now, when I think about it, I said if they haven't found a cavernous sinus, it must have been a mucormycosis. This is the thought that I had at that time. So I was very, very dejected and I was very upset for quite a number of days. He was a very young man with a very young wife and a small child. And this is how it was. So the registrar days were very nice. I had to be registrar at the same unit. That was the usual custom. So I was registrar to Dr.M.V.L.Kothari. And I used to look after all the interesting cases of Dr.M.V.Kothari. So Ganesha was still there, they extended his registration days. So it was nice. I worked very hard as a registrar also, so all my patients at least twice in a day and more often. And I was pestered by these students to teach. I was an hour reading for my MD, and I used to read. I used to finish my work at about 8:30 in the evening, and after Morris, my batman, fed me and looked after me, my physical comforts, I would sit on the veranda under a lamp and read till about 4 o'clock in the morning. And then I would get up at 8 o'clock in the morning, 7:30 in the morning, and be in the ward by 8:30 in the morning. So sleep was very scattered. So I used to catch about 1 hour or 1.5 hours sleep in the afternoon. And these wretched students would knock on my door and pester me, promise to take the clinical course. So willy-nilly, I used to do that also and finish and keep my word on that more often than not. And they were very strict from the point of view of holidays. For example, when I was in the DJ, the boys used to take leave for 1 month or 1.5 months for their exams. I requested leave for 8 days before my MD exam. He said, no. How can 8 days make a difference to your knowledge of medicine? Then on top of that, can you believe it, on top of this was rather not nice. I would never do that. On top of that, Dr. Raghavan was going to lecture on something or the other in the United States or somewhere or the other. And 7 days before my exam, I want you to look up all the papers from this year to this year on diabetes and its complications. This is my exam does. I don't think I'll be able to do all this. No. What are you going to do now? There's no need for you to read. Whatever you know. How much more are you going to know in 7 days? So that was a real problem. But I had dear friends. Of course, I did a good bit of the work. I distributed it amongst my friends who were not doing their exams. And did as much as they did, I also did. I just didn't give it completely to them, but they helped me with the work and I presented it to him exactly as he wanted it. That's what MD I did very well. I think I did very well. I remember writing an essay on medical problems in the geriatric group of patients or something like that. I think I wrote a very nice essay on that with a lot of poetry put into it. I think I got a distinction both in my MBBS and in medicine, but in MD it was rare to get a distinction. I think they gave me a distinction. And I think they even told me after the exam that you've done brilliantly, we were going to give you a distinction, etc. So I remember running to my dad and mom, and telling them, Dad, they say I got a distinction. She was very happy. But my mother, even if I did anything as well as possible, either in school or college, she would have friends in the evening coming to meet her. And they would ask her, how is Farokh done? Not quite well. Nothing more than that. Nothing more. Sometimes the mouth would gape, and if she knew I was there, she would be doubly quiet. Quite, this is the more, he did well, he did quite well. That's about all. My dad, of course, was extremely pleased, but he was busy working, so nobody asked very much. At the time it came, we were in the state. So that's as far as college went. But I was quite naughty in college, I must say, during my register. I did some very naughty things, and I don't want to tell about them. But when I left college, when I finished it, I wrote on the walls of my room all the things that I did, etc., etc. I don't know why I did that. This is him. I'm leaving the thing, let it be. But the consultants are very pleased with me. Now it's a funny thing. Now see how things happen. Of course, I had no people sponsoring me or anything like that at all. So there was a vacancy for a temporary assistant honorary-ship at the Kenyan hospital, right? I had written a couple of papers by then, and out and out I had the best CV on paper at that point in time. But they gave it to somebody else, who was a friend of mine, who was a registrar in another unit, because that man was quite powerful and he was quite on the committee, etc., etc. On what grounds? I said, doesn't matter. I didn't bother about it at all. So that was the first thing I read. Really, they should have, by right or by merit, I think they should have really given it to it. There was no hard feeling, there was no bitterness, or no nothing at all. That was one thing. So I did my full 2 years there. I did the FCPS, I did the MD, and then I wanted to go abroad because I wanted to see what medicine was like abroad. So my dad insisted that you must get an all-round finishing, and I went abroad. I went first to the Middlesex Hospital, where I was merely attached to the unit. They were very polite, I must say. The professor particularly was very nice man. And he saw that I knew my stuff reasonably well because I would answer it quite well, quite easily. And there I realized one of the great drawbacks of Indians working there. It was to interrupt somebody speaking. They cannot bear that sound. The English particularly just cannot bear that. Somebody is speaking and you butt in and say something, they just can't understand how anyone can do that. They're just outside their game. And I realized how important it was to be well mannered as far as that goes. Never to speak unless everybody was silent. If you want to ask something or if you want to interject, don't interject when somebody is speaking. Wait till he starts. This is something I learned there. The staff was also right. I had a very great registrar there called Dr. Campbell, who's made a name for himself. He was one of the chaps who started the McMaster University in Canada later on. And he was a very bright man who did quite a lot of research on quite a number of things. And we used to have quite a few discussions there. There also it was extraordinary, The sister was the absolute queen of the place. I'll tell you how, when I was there, I was a junior most level at that time, mind you. The professors around would be, again the doors were closed. That's how I think Dr.M.V.L.Kothari got that. The doors were closed. And before the round would start, there would be coffee. And there was this sister, like Queen Victoria, hoity-toity absolutely, who would serve coffee. And the way that she served coffee used to amuse me. First embarrassed me and then amused me. She would first give the coffee to the professor, then to the assistant professor, then to the senior registrar. Then if I'm next to the senior registrar by chance, she would skip me completely and give it to the next person and to the next person. And I was a junior, so she would hand it to me last. It's amazing, really amazing to me. If anybody else also, was out of turn, he would be skipped. He would go in rank. And then they would have their coffee, and Queen Victoria would go out in that side room, and she would open the door, and the consultant, the professor would be standing behind her, and she would enter the room first, and the professor would. Amazingly, this is how it was. So these are the fine things which I noticed there. But they were very good basically on the clinical side. And that is what impressed me very much. Worked at Brompton, and my best experience was in Edinburgh, where I worked with one of the greatest chest people. He was Professor Crofton. Of course, when I went to Professor Crofton, he had come to the KEM hospital, and one of the meetings I had presented a case, and he liked the way I presented and complimented me. So I asked one of the boss, from whose unit, he said nice things about me. Could you write just an introductory letter? So when I went to Edinburgh, I went and showed him the letter. He said, yes, I remember you said, but you know, this is a difficult job to get. I can't give it to you because there are many people who will be applying. At least you must get your membership exam. I can't give it to you. But I said, I've done my MD, which is, I'm sorry, doctor, but you know, here we have to our standards here, and you must get your membership exam. I can't possibly offer you to. If you pass the membership exam, well, then you can apply. He never said I will give it to you. So fortunately, I was happy in doing that. Now the membership examinations were remarkable, I'll tell you, in Edinburgh particularly. There was a South African called Dr. Batty. He was a racist of the first kind. And he was amongst the many examiners in... I decided to take chess. At that time you could take chess, any specialty, and you had to do as that specialty and general medicine. So I decided to take chess, that was fine. Because I thought if I went into Crofton's unit, I would get a real world figure unit to work in. And, but they said that there's this horrible fellow called Batty, and if you get any Indian getting him, it's finished. So every night when I used to do my prayers, my kasti, I used to tell good Lord, my good Lord, please give me anybody else. But they said this guy is very bad. Don't give him to. Would you believe it? I got him. I had to give my medical practical in general medicine to him. So on that day, I well remember, it was a remarkable day. It was snowing in Edinburgh and I slipped on the snow whilst going to the exam. So my whole suit was soaked completely. When I went to this particular hospital, wherever it was, there were some 7 of us there. I was the only Indian, there were Australians, New Zealanders, British, Scottish, etc. So I said, he won't perhaps know, he might think I'm from here because I was fairer than most Indians. So I said, let's see what happens. So I just get my lunch. And he asked, where are you from? And he said, I'm from Melbourne, sir. And where are you from? So and then I was asked, and where are you from? I said, I'm from Bombay, sir. India. I said, yes, India. Just look. The floor of this hospital is hard, doctor. You have to mind yourself well. I was shattered, you know, because it clearly showed what he was. Right? So examining, right. I had a case which I thought was reasonably nice. A gentleman, and a very nice gentleman, who gave me a good history. I think I well remember he had severe abdominal pain and was thought to probably have an abdominal catastrophe like a peptic ulcer or something, but the story was stipulated with pain referred to the upper abdomen. He also had rheumatoid disease, and he had, later on when I examined nitrous, so that was a long case. We were supposed to get 45 minutes for the long case. He comes to me in 15 minutes and says, come on. I am sorry, sir. I said, this is just 15 minutes. I'm supposed to have 35 minutes. He said, me and walks up. I'm in a desperate hurry. He comes back after 30. I said, if I send him away now, I finished. If I send him away now, he's not going to like it very much. So yes. So I started the story, etc. He listened to me, and then I said, he also, this is the immediate reason why he was admitted. But he gives a history of having pain in his joints, and it started first in his right shoulder. That's not true. It started in his hands. So I asked, Mr. So-and-so, will you please tell us, where did your pain start? Fortunately, he said, it was in my shoulder. So that's how the exam. And then he harassed me a lot, and I was sure he was going to cut me. He came to the stomach, and when he came to the left gastric, I was well prepared. I told him everything. What do cows eat? I said, they eat grass. How do they digest grass? Now, I said, obviously they have an enzyme which digests grass. Why don't you eat grass? Does he, can't you digest it? I said, I can't digest it, sir, because I don't have the enzyme which digests grass. Plain simple and all. But, he had a spin, and I thought, from the way he sort of looked at me, that he's going to fail. But amazingly, he passed me. And amazingly, there were 2 people he passed, and one was a Sri Lankan. Out of the 40 he examined in his course, in his duty for that exam, amazingly, one was a Sri Lankan and one was me. That's how it was. So it wasn't as bad as all that. So it was a nice exam, and there again in this exam, they don't give rank. In those days, they didn't give ranks, but they gave the list to the people concerned of those who did not have to be given any scrape marks to level them off in case they needed to be passed. And I happened to be one of them. So I went to Crofton and said, "Sir, I passed this exam. I do hope you will let me come to your college," which he very nicely said, "Yes, all right, I was going to." It was fun, okay, great fun, very nice. And there, even at that time, there was euthanasia, which was shocking to me. The second in command was a chap called Dr. Grant, Scottish man, very nice, extremely nice. All of them were extremely nice. So one day they had, I was looking after the wards, and there was a patient with severe COPD. And we were looking after him, and it was my evening off, so I had gone off, and I came back at night and I wanted to take a night run. I took the night run on my phone. I found this fellow Sam was completely comatose. I said, "What's happened to him?" He was quite all right in the evening when I left. So he's been given an injection. I said, "What injection?" He said, "We're giving him morphine, sir." "Doctor." I said, "Why are we giving him morphine?" "Who asked you to give him morphine?" "I'm not giving him morphine." He said, "No, I'm still." Says, "Come on." In those days there was nothing we had to do. We had Coramine. I don't know if you heard of that. Coramine? Coramine was our stimulant, which we used to use. So I sat the whole night with him, giving him drop by drop by drop by drop. It aroused the patient. During that time, you made him cough. You gave him physio, and he emptied his chest. And by the morning, it was all right. So next morning, I was quite upset about the whole thing. And I know I was brutally, from that point of view, one of my drawbacks was I was not diplomatic at all in these things. I was quite brutally frank. So when this patient came to, "Sir," I said, "I'm sorry, but I found that somebody had ordered morphine on this man, morphine on a patient who has severe COPD and carbon dioxide retention. This is simply not going to get it." So they looked at each other and said nothing at that time. Then I told him what I did. I did them, and I think he's all right now. Then later on, he said, "Doctor, this man has been coming every month. He's great strain of the family. This, that." And I said, "I'm sorry, sir, but I just can't believe that. I just don't believe that. You can't do that. I would never do that." Then there were patients like this where I didn't protest really, but patients with brain tumor, for example, who were very bad and who were hopeless to die. So this is what they would do. I'm telling you, in those days, this was 1950, 59. They say, morphine first, he's still alive, double the dose of morphine. Then half the time, this is how, I don't know whether you would agree or not. I would have let him die this way. Why should I do something, that hastens his death? But this, I'm telling you, this is what it was, even in those days. Silent euthanasia was practiced in those days. So then now, I finished about a year and a half with Crofton. And he said, "I'd like to make you the registrar in my unit as soon as so-and-so was." That time, a call came. Not a call came, a letter came. In those days, I never phoned my parents except on the days when I passed my examinations. That was the only time I rang them. No, I didn't ring them, I telegraphed in those days. So a letter came from my dad that there is a vacancy, I'm told, at the Kenyan hospital for an assistant honorary post. And they got in touch with me and they want you to come back because they would be very keen for you to join, considering that you have such a good record. So I didn't know what to do. I said, this is a super job. When am I ever going to get otherwise a chance like this? So I spoke to Professor Crofton. Crofton, by the way, was the man who was the first to try a 3-drug regime on TB patients and showed that if they took it properly without any mistakes and without any going off them for something, the cure rate was 98%. He was the first man who did this. Anyway, he said, all right, but I don't think you're right yet for something. He tells me, I think you need more experience. You're good, I grant you that you're very good, but you need more. In my country, I wouldn't make you a consultant. I would have you work a little bit. He just told me that. So I said, so this is a good chance for me. Let me give it a try. He says, all right, you go, and I'll keep your job for 3 months. Open for 3 months. If you come back within 3 months, we will go ahead. If not, you let me know. So at the behest, I came to hospital and I came back. At that time, Shantilal Mehta got in touch with me. I don't know how he heard, what he heard, where he heard, whatever it was. My dad didn't know him. He got in touch and asked me to meet him. And I met him. And he said, we are taking new people at the JJ. I'd like you to come. I'd like you to join. So I asked my dad, he said, this is my hospital. How can you miss it? It will be the greatest thing for me that you are now working in the same hospital that I am. So that's how it came.
What year was this?
Oh, I would say, I'll tell you what year. It must have been 1960 or so, 59, 60, I think. I don't know. Came to JJ. And the JJ, of course, I was originally treated as an enemy because I came from an opposite camp, you know. And being very blunt and forthright, I had my own views about whatever went on there. And very often they didn't like it. You know. I remember one of the things was Dr. Ginde came there. Dr. Ginde was my teacher. Ginde was my teacher. I had done a surgical term under him. You follow? And he was a wonderful man from the point of view of his surgical expertise and his care. I'll tell you what, he was at that time a general surgeon, but was also doing neurosurgery and was ultimately went on to neurosurgery. But he was doing neurosurgical work, and for example, he would operate on a patient. I was in his batch, when he was a student in his batch, because he was a general surgeon also, you see. Which other general surgeon, I think, I can't remember who was the other general surgeon. Anyway, I was in his batch. So he would tell me, boy, he would say, boy, you will sit here the whole night, and every half an hour you will take his blood pressure. I said, right, sir. Fine. So I would sit and every half an hour take his blood pressure, literally follow it, because the patient is, you know, very ill. Take his blood pressure, write it down, and if there's anything, report to the registrar concerned. And by about 3 o'clock or so, I would be asleep on the blood pressure machine. And he would tap properly. You've fallen asleep. I'm so sorry, sir. You have come to see this patient. You see? And therefore I admire him. And he was beautiful. And his general surgery, I mean, we never went into his, when he did it, but we naturally assisted him or were around him when he did his general surgery. And he was beautifully meticulous. So beautifully meticulous. And we had great surgeons there. Really great surgeons. There was Dr. Farokh E, you know. There was Dr. Munsif, also, and of course the great Dr. Malika. Dr. Malika was great, you know, and he had this great relationship, Nimish. I think nobody must ever have got the amount of surgical work that the registrar has than in Dr. Mallika's day. He would do two major surgeries, and real major surgeries, like for example, pancreatic cancer. He would be there from 9 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the evening removing a pancreatic cancer. And there will be 8 other lists. And Nimish would be working after that till 6 o'clock in the morning, finishing the list. Name it and he has done them. And what they would use is give us hernias and hydroceles to do on our own with the registrar just watching them. For me, that was the amount of work in those days, the registrars. But can you imagine 2.5, 3 years that Nimish was there with him on his operation days? He would get anything and everything under the sun. So I was very fond of Ginde. And at the JJ, they were very antagonists to Ginde. You didn't know that?
No.
You were at the JJ?
I was.
Before you, they were quite antagonists to him. He was made the head, so that they couldn't stand. Because naturally, Kaji was working there for such a long time at the JJ hospital, and to have a head above him now from another hospital is patently wrong. Maybe, but I think they were quite rough with him. And I think they absolutely left. But he had the, not only was he superb as a surgeon, but he had at that time the pull. He could have got anything and everything, one wanted for a neurosurgical department at the JJ. But I think by and large they didn't like him. And I think I made myself very clear on that one, that I was not on their side at all. So I remained a bit of an enemy for quite some time at the JJ hospital. Quizzling, as they said. Till ultimately, everything settled down and I was very happy. I think if you were to ask me, I would say the KEM was where I was born and started to breed slowly, and JJ where I really matured.
In which unit were you working when you joined?
Earlier on, I think I was working with Dr. Nene for a short time, and then with Dr. Sulaki. A very sweet man, a man who had no practice at all, who used to come to JJ by tram. You won't believe it, but he was a very sweet man, a very nice man. Got along splendidly with him. He used to leave almost, I was his daughter, so I used to do most of the work there. And there was no way in which you could do much research there because there was no facility at all. So, I then remember Nani Palkilala happened to be a patient of mine because I lived in a small one-room flat in the same building that he lived in his 4-bedroom flat. There was just one flatlet at that place. So I got married and lived there. So he got to know me there. He used to come to me. He was a very sweet man, charming man. So I told him about this. He said, "What do you want?" I said, "I want to set up a lung function unit." You see, there's no lung function unit anywhere. There was one lung function unit, which I had worked when Dr. Raghavan was there and I was a registrar. Just a basic lung function. I started. This is all right. He just finished the Maharaja's Privy Council, Privy Purse case, which he had won. So he said, "The money I have won there, you take and you do what you want with it." So I asked for this respiratory equipment. It was from a Dutch firm. I forget which Dutch firm, but it was from a Dutch firm. And I got it with great difficulty, got it from the customs, and I set up the whole lung function unit, everything, except the CO diffusion, everything. I set it up, I worked it, but nobody was there to give me a hand to work it also. There was no person to work it also, they couldn't give me a hand. So I used to work it. And I worked it for 7 years. And when I started work on pulmonary vascular failure. That was the main work that I did at the JJ hospital, other than reporting interesting cases or writing out on it. The public with the stuff we did was very interesting, because it is remarkable that we not only did the clinical study, we did the histopathological study, which was the first time properly done in different stages, and we did a follow-up, which was amazing, because we used to have the address. One was in Udwadia, one was in say, sometime on a Sunday morning we would go in a car, at that particular place, इधर कौन नहीं है, जरा सा मुसाफर बात है कि इधर कहाँ गया, तो इधर वो तो अभी वहाँ गया, तो अभी then we would go off and we would trace as many as possible, and we followed them for a very long time. It was fun again, really fun. Many Sundays were spent in tracing these tuberculosis of the patients.
And this is where you did all your lung biopsies also, isn't it?
That's where we did the lung biopsies.
And this was the first time lung biopsies had been done in this disease ever.
One lung biopsy had been done earlier, just one. We did it in about 21 or 22 patients in different stages of the natural history, and worked out the natural history, the histopathology, and showed that not only do you get eosinophils and eosinophilic pneumonia, not only did it involve the bronchi, but it involved the lung substance proper, pneumonia, eosinophilic abscesses actually. And then as time went on, the eosinophils were replaced by lymphocytes, histiocytes, you get a mixed reaction, and then still later you have no eosinophils, you have an increasing fibrous tissue later.
And microfilaria?
Yes, that is the one we found also. First time, amazingly, in one of the lung biopsies, done very early in the natural history of the disease, we could see microfilaria. And we could prove that it was really a response to the microfilaria. So it was quite a nice piece of work, actually. And
so all these lung biopsies also had to be done by you?
No, they were done by ourselves. By Dr.M.V.L.Kothari. All permissions and everything taken, and it was a worthwhile study. Of course, now you don't need to do anything like that because you know what you did. And the other work, of course, was the tetanus work. That I think was something I did which I feel very happy about. When one of the honorees died in JJ Hospital, Dr. Kapoor, O.P. Kapoor, was a assistant honorary. I was already an honorary, full honorary on one side. He was to take charge of the work. So he told me that I don't want to take care of it. That particular unit was supposed to be looking after the tetanus workers. I don't want to look at this tetanus. So they all die and it's terrible. So why don't you come and see if you want? So I said, if everybody is dying, I'm not going to take it up. So he said, come and see. So I went and saw it. It's a ghastly place, dirty, filthy for one thing. I said, why can't you keep it clean at least? Then I said, all right, tell me people here who you know are going to die within 48 hours. So I promise you this fellow and this fellow is going to die. And I looked at them and they looked like as if they'd die next minute. So I came here and spoke to the trustees and said, I want a favor from you. I'm going to transfer 2 patients with severe tetanus into the ICU here, and I want your courtesy, your charity, your kindness to let me look after them free, so that you don't charge them at all in any circumstances. Amazing people. They just said, go ahead, let's see. So I brought these 2 people here, and my boys and girls and me struggled with them for so many days and to both lived. So I thought this was a real challenge, and they were the most poor but poor. No one to look after them really. So I said, all right, I'll take the work. I'll handle it. So, there was a big problem. There were no residential. So they all died because there was no ventilation to give people who breathe at all. So by that time I was reasonably good, not earning great, but I was quite happy with my work and my practice, my private practice. And I'd started here at that time. This was 1964. So I said, amongst the things that I did, by the way, when I started, was that I was given, I went to the city, there was this, what was his name, Jal Patel, must have heard. He called me and he said, will you work in the central bank for 2 hours in the afternoon? I said, yes, I work in the bank because I was earning 700 rupees, just that, barely able to make 2 ends meet. So I said, all right, I will work in the central bank. Your salary will be 200, they will give you 200 rupees. Is that all right with you? I said, yes, it's all right with me. 2 hours in the day. So I was working there. I am telling you the story. Now this Pune was chewing pan all the time. He comes out there, ha, just like, ha, kai paisa dete? I said, don't so. Ha. I said, kai, ha, kai karte. My dad, they came, kai gate and he ends up 14, 15, 16, 17. Gone. The Jal Patel sahib la milte. Tula 200 rupees dete. He said, really? Next time that my turn came, I went. He was in Bombay House, looking after these data. They said, sir, I just wanted to make sure. Is it true that you are really the doctor and you get 14,000 rupees and I am doing the work here and I am given 200 rupees? Yes, yes, but I will make you join me here. I said, thank you, sir. Please forgive me. I would like to resign. And I resigned. So then after that I was even more difficult time because just 200 rupees came in handy in those days. So at that time, this Hicks people said that we wanted somebody to help us, answer letters that come from people who have, had some reaction on it. So I said, all right. So they were giving me 700 rupees, which is a great thing. So 1 hour, 2 days in the week, I would go there and I would write beautiful replies to letters. So and so, gave me a severe reaction and doctor writes, I gave back and I said, even water sometimes gives reactions like that. Anything can give a reaction in this. It doesn't matter, doctor. This is what you should do and you must always do a sensitivity test. And if you are using it for the first time at the patient's house, always have adrenaline ready and a steroid ready. God forbid if he has a reaction. I believe they've still kept those specimen letters of mine at Hex. So that's what I used to do there. So now this fellow who was in charge of medicine was a German chap. He rather liked me. Typical German, So I went there, approached him and I had this statement for him. So you must do Mr. Winter, you must donate to my tetanus. Hex must donate. It's a huge company, international company. What do you want? I said, I want 3 machines. 3 machines, breathing machines for patients who are very ill. So he said, I don't know, I have to ask the managing director. I said, you must take me to your managing director. And he was a chap called Mr. Niebling. He was a Nazi apparently in those days and he had come here and he was in charge. I told him, okay, Mr. Niebling, you are a huge company. Surely do some charity in this country. So many Indians are using your drug. You make no big profit. Can't you give some money towards this worthy purpose? It's not a bad idea, he says. He tells Mr. Winton, why don't you go and see them? See what's happening there and then decide whether we should give this money. I said, that's a brilliant idea. So Mr. Winton was planned to come on Wednesday to the tetanus home, right? So I arranged a nice table for him with a tablecloth and I told my 2 registrars and my husband, you must get in the canteen tea, just a mile away from the wall, and you must get him some pakoras and some biscuits. Alright? After about 20 minutes of his coming here, it must be on the sleep. And I told them, for those 20 minutes, you will stop giving them compost, you will stop paralyzing them, you will just leave them convulsing, just for 20 minutes. So Mr. Vinicius comes in and says, beautiful soup, handkerchief there, tie this, that, etc. And he comes over. The water is of course stinking, absolutely, absolutely, because no air conditioning, can you believe it? 10 plus more when there was no air conditioning. So first of all, there's a little bit of shock on his face when he comes in, then I would sit down. And then I talk to him, see how they are, and he sees them all conversing, vomiting, conversing, what have you. And then comes the tea. See, I drink up my tea, I was used to the sort of tea that we had. The poor fellow put his mouth to it, immediately put it down. He then started sweating from every pore. I went on showing him, would you like to come down and show you over the place? No, I'll give you. How many do you want? I said, at least 3, please. That's how I got my first 3 air conditioners. Then Voltas fellow was my patient. He used to come to see me. So I just straight up say, you have to give air conditioners over this. I don't know if you want to come and see it, but you must air conditioner. Yeah, I'll send my man. Sent his man. In a biffy, the whole place was air conditioned. So that's what it was. And then I have to show results. So I think it was the motivation with my boys, you know. They also, can you believe it, when you interview, they said they were lazy, this, that, nothing of the sort. They worked round the clock for 48 hours, all of them on their feet. They are without food or without drink. And the nurses with them round the clock. And I would come after my rooms over, I was at Fountain, from 7 o'clock, I would come there at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock and stay till 11, 11:30. My wife used to wait in the car waiting for me. I would go and stay there with them and see everything, and I would ask them to ring me at 1 o'clock in the morning and tell me how is this, what are you doing, And we had a board, we put up a board, and we showed admissions, so-and-so name, complications, you know, then the days that went by, death, survival, etc. So they could see for themselves what is happening. And in that way, we brought down the mortality from a horrendous mortality to an overall mortality of about 70% or so, 170%, which is very good. But there were 3 ventilators, and there were 8 beds. Or was it 9 beds? 8 or 9 beds. What happened if more than 3 people wanted a ventilator? It was really this was the ethical part. What do I do? Who do I give it to? These 2 are equally bad now. Do I give it to him or to him? What do I do? So I approached these people again and said, look, I want a favor from you again. Forgive me for asking this. I want to do a study on these patients, on severe diabetes. And I want the very bad patients, the really very, very, very bad patients which require real intensive care, which the boys there can't give because there is no gadgetry to come here. Would you allow it, please? I said, yes. Yes. We won't charge. Go ahead. Do what you want. So you won't believe it, in those days, sometimes half the ICU beds were tables. No one said anything. Those were the days. And we took 32 patients who would have died for sure. You won't believe it. And only 1 died here. Only 1 died here. I'm going to show that, with meticulous care what you do. And I remember for one patient particularly, I got a call in the middle of the night. Sanjeev Mehta, now he's consultant respiratory fellow in Udwadia or some such place. He was a registrar. He says, so this patient, I have something very sorry to tell you. what's the matter? I know he was very good. What is so bad? I've done a great mistake. He said, what is it? Tell me, Amit, what is it? My first thing was that as soon as the patient was admitted, he should be scrubbed clean because they're all muck, literally dirt muck on them. They were poor people. Scrubbed clean, thoroughly, absolutely, before you do anything. Instead of, I thought I was scrubbing with water, but I was scrubbing with carbolic acid. Oh God, I screamed at him. Yes, and shift him immediately. So we shifted him here, and I think it was the most difficult case we have had. He had burns, carbolic acid burns, he had a complete renal shutdown, he had severe tetanus, he had secondary infection, he fought and struggled, but he survived in the end. So this is, I think, a very pleasing thing. And the boys could see for themselves, and that is where I wrote my monograph. Besides the papers on tetanus, I wrote this monograph on tetanus, which was at that time the standard work on tetanus. And we did a lot of studies here. We studied the hemodynamics of severe tetanus, which had not been done at all, ever. All the cardiac output, the peripheral vascular resistance, pulmonary artery pressure, pulmonary vascular resistance, everything. And why and how we manage these patients with severe tetanus, grade 4 tetanus, with severe autonomic disturbances. And why they used to die earlier on. And what is it that we did which helped them to survive? So that's probably the best work I've done, if you ask me. Besides the critical care, that I established in this hospital first. So that's how it was, basically. I think I've answered all the questions. Yeah, it's nice to ask this question. The most important thing in medicine is to practice medicine the same way with everyone. If you make distinctions, you could never practice it. Let me just give you an example. You have a person who's well known. You feel, I think we should go ahead and get a tracheostomy done. But there will be pressure put upon you. Why are you doing it now? Can't you wait? If something goes wrong, there will be lots of noise. Go ahead with it. If you want me to look after you need to do tracheostomy. I can explain everything to the relatives. But this is why we need to do a tracheostomy. That is it. But if you say that no, it's so important if something goes wrong. But the pressures can be very great sometimes, and it's not easy to withstand that. It's certainly not easy to withstand that. But if you follow this cardinal principle, that you will treat them exactly. Forget who he is, forget who he is. What would you do if you were Mr. So-and-so who didn't know from Adam? What would you do? You would do a tracheostomy? Yes, I will do it. Then why should I not do it? If you do that, I think you can handle it. And you need to be a little lucky also, because medicine is something like this, something can be. But then, you're doing it because you feel that's the right thing to do. You're doing it out of good judgment, your personal judgment. Some judgments can be wrong, of course. Maybe you are exposed sometimes. But I think that's the best way to go about it. But the pressure is great. The pressure was very great when Amitabh Bachchan was here. I used to keep this window open because there was a mob outside. And I knew that if you were to die, they would probably burn the hospital and they would burn me with it. So I said, I'll escape into the Arabian Sea from here and come out somewhere in Marina for service and Marina. Something like that. That was. But he was a gentleman. He's one of those actors who was really a gentleman. So that's the most important. The emotional pressures are great. Emotional pressures even now are great. Keeps you awake, particularly when. That's why I think I've come to a stage when I feel that now I should stop looking after ill people upstairs and just be content with just sitting in my work here. And perhaps look at references that I can do and not take immediate responsibility of people. patients who are very. It's high time. My wife has been saying that for ages, but some of the other are not yet. TV, I'm very. I live in this cocoon. I'm completely divorced from the outside. And you won't believe it, I've forgotten one day. One of the things I will do when I stop working is to rediscover all the roads and the streets. Because my journey is from home to here to home. On a Sunday, home to the club. Have a sandwich and a cup of coffee. And that's it. And to the NCP, which I'm very fond of. So I'm really, totally, even the medical people, I'm completely outside their ambit. So there's no way of doing. I refuse any press interviews, by and large. Very occasionally, if it's a book which has come out and somebody wants to talk about it, that's fine. But otherwise I refuse all TV. Once at TV, yes I did, when people from Brampton had come down and they had organized a conference and they had inflicted on me the duty of being a president of that conference. I've never stood for any official post in anything at all. I don't think I personally don't like to do that. But apparently I believe there must have been a squabble between other people and they said, let's put this idiot into the thing so that they don't fight now. So that's how I think I became a person. Otherwise I've never been in any. I've taken part in most of them. I've spoken at many conferences, almost all over the world. But I've never been a secretary or president or this or that. Humanities have always been very important. I used to read when I was in school. In fact, I did most of my reading before I joined medical college, amazingly. And a good bit of my reading after, I came back and had no work to do. So that was the time, when I used to read a lot. And even after that, I very often used to read at night, late into the night. It's something which interests me, particularly history. So I used to read a lot, and I have been reading a lot, and I still do whenever I get a chance. Yes, this is important. Bedside medicine is a dying art. When I came back, I used to see KM, and I used to drop in at the KM, nothing to do in those days, before I got drop into JJ. And teaching was in a separate room where they would, have a patient and they would, give the causes of hemoptysis and how to treat hemoptysis. But the real bedside teaching, which we used to do, was no longer practiced. My main round at JJ was on Wednesday. And you won't believe it, but people from KEM, JJ, Sahar, all used to come and we had 40 or 50 people with me. I used to work literally. And it was always at the bedside. Always first the history. What did you make out from the history? Have you come to any diagnosis on the history? What lines are you looking at? How are you feeling the spleen? It's not the way to feel the spleen. Look, this is the way to feel this. Listen here, what do you hear? That's what the teaching is no longer there. So people have forgotten to use their eyes and ears and hands. And they just look at ECGs, or they look at a scan, or look at some figures churned out by a machine. And I see here also people sometimes from outside, newer people who come. They don't even look at the patient. They don't even talk to the patient. They talk to the registrar. Ask him this question, the registrar's abdomen is carrying on. Your patient is. Can you imagine yourself being in that situation and feeling that this guy who is supposed to be looking after me has even not even talked to me? That's the what medicine is talked to, and that's the sad part. I think it's so sad. And it's not only here. Because I have people sometimes come during the term and they meet from Guy's Hospital or sometimes from America or sometimes from Australia, very frequently, but at least in the year, a couple of times in the year, they spend a couple of months. The same. And when I asked this guy who was finally MBBS, I said, "This is not the way you must study home." He says, "Yes, I do." So the thing is, why is that? He says, "There's so much to study and we have such little time with patients." That's the reason. We didn't have genetics and this and that. The sort of biochemistry that is taught. There's so much to study there that they say that. And look at the way examinations also are. In our days, there was always a clinical examination where you have face-to-face with the patient, you just talk until you discuss the patient. Nowadays, they have a case scenario. Man age 62 comes with this, what will you do? Right, you've done that. Now what will you do?
No patient.
No patient. It's all imaginary. Completely different to a patient. The man with this, he has glands here, he has a spleen, he has that. But how do you know that? The examiner would have found it, the student would have found the spleen and would have found the glands to start off with. Isn't it? So there is that big thing. The reason being that there are so many medical students. So how do you look at so many students or examine so many students? So that give these papers to them. That's how it is. That's that thing. So, time for reading and writing, as I said, I'm a bit antisocial in a way. I don't attend these parties as far as possible. And when I want to do something, I disappear for some time, leaving my locum, and I'm dead to the world. I do what I have to do for a long time. Performance of tests also now, even I have got into that. Doing tests which really are not necessary. But sometimes I feel, if something turns out and you say you missed this because you didn't do this test. But even here, doing a test from A to Z, a man has had a headache for 20 years. He's had migraine for 20 years. And 8 days ago, he comes to you saying that my headaches have increased for you. You don't have necessary to go and do a scan for that straight away, isn't it? But that is, what happens. Or a man has a chest pain, he goes to a cardiologist. You don't necessarily find go to an angiogram. Have you told him? Have you found out that his son has decamped somewhere or the other? And that this is an emotional stress that he has had? Where is the history? No history. It's just this chest pain. Get this. Pain in the lower part of my tummy, colonoscopy. That's what medicine has come to. Frankly, it's a sad thing. Dealing with the human beings is so important. I think the basis of clinical medicine is the bond between the doctor and the patient. I mean, I'm not talking of people who come to with simple cough or a cold or anything else. He gets well on his own. You don't have to spend a lot of time. But if a person is really ill, it is very necessary that you build a bond between the doctor and the patient. The patient has to trust you. The patient has to have faith in you. And that's so important. People are really very ill. Faith is a very important thing. Faith is so very important. I don't know how it works, but it does work. Somehow, someway or the other, it's probably the mind-body complex which is responsible. Patient has faith in you, it's a good bit of the battle on your side, and he's really ill. And it's amazing how a patient can make out a person who's shamming and who doesn't really care from a person, doctor who really genuinely cares. So I think doctor-patient relationship, the bond between the doctor-patient relationship lies at the very heart of clinical medicine. Medical reports is so important. I even now, for any really ill patient there, registrar, of course, the boys also write their daily notes. I write a summary on that patient every 6 or 7 days, which sometimes can go into pages. I write everything that has happened, everything that has been done. Also, I write why I have been thinking on these lines and what is my differential on this point. Why I have done this and why I have not done this. Why? Because in these days, if you have something on record like that, it immediately shows that here's this person, who's scared. Of course I can make a mistake. Of course I've made mistakes. But at least I've done my best. And that's all that you can do. And that's important. If you have done your best and you haven't recorded what has happened, it's
nobody
important.
knows.
It's in these days particularly. I think it's very important. We inscribed one poem, I think not a poem, but I will never forget the lines of Rabindranath Tagore, when as a poor student in London, with no money in my pockets, eating Cadbury's chocolates for the last 7 days of the month. Because in those days, you were allowed only a certain amount of money. And it was very, very difficult to live on that money. So I first started at the Indian Students' Union Hostel in London. It's an Indian Students' Union Hostel, which is cheap. Even then it was difficult to make 2 ends meet. And there on the wall was a beautiful line of Rabindranath telling me about it. Shall I try and recollect it for you?
Yeah, sure.
Do not forget, my friends, to stand before the proud and the mighty in your white robes of simpleness. Let your crown and let your freedom be the freedom of the soul. Then build God's throne daily on the ample bareness of your poverty, and know that what is huge is not great, and that pride is not everlasting. Yet your crown be of simplicity. I forget the first line, the second line. Let your crown be of simplicity, your freedom the freedom of the soul. Build God's throne daily on the ample bareness of your poverty, and know that what is huge is not great, and that pride is not everlasting. That's very nice.
No, I haven't read this. I didn't know this.
Yes. Let your crown of simplicity. Yes, simplicity and your freedom, the freedom of the soul. Build God's throne, the ample bareness of your poverty, and know that what is huge is not great, and that pride is not everlasting. I think those are words for a student. Isn't it?
I agree. When you look back on your long career in medicine, what satisfies you the most, and what is it that gives you the biggest regret? Not having been able to do something.
Yes, what satisfies me the most is to have somebody who's very, very ill, and who everybody says, okay, well, let him go now, he's not going to survive. And you say, no, I can't let him go, he's so young, he's not got a cancer, he's got a disease which potentially is reversible, so let's not give up, let's carry on. And he comes back and he leaves. We have a patient like this just now, a young man who had H1N1 and was very, very ill, had gram-negative sepsis following that, severe ARDS, and held on for some time, and then seemed as if he was going to die. And then the next day again became held on again, and is now on the way up, and perhaps we must be living more. And it's quite interesting, the young wife. One day I told him, I'm so sorry, I don't think we can do much more than we have done, and I don't think we're going to see it through. And she was sad. So I said, what can I do? I said, yes, you can. I said, go and pray. So the next day, things suddenly seem to turn around. And I tell her, you know what, he's a little better today. I'm sure it's because I prayed. I said, yes, you're right. It's because you prayed. Go again and pray. This is helpful. You know, these things, are satisfy you so much. And the regret, of course, is, if you failed. If you tried your best and, it just come to a zero. Originally, the regret was also sometimes the ingratitude of people whom you looked after. But then, in one of our prayers, and I always tell this to the boys, always I tell them that righteousness for the sake of righteousness. What you are doing is what you think you are doing. You are doing what you are doing because it's just the right thing to do. That means you are righteous for the sake of being righteous and for nothing else. So don't expect anything out of that. You have done a real duty by doing the righteousness for the sake of right, because it is the right, because you think this is the right thing, therefore I am doing the right thing. Nothing else should matter. You must look at life like that. Because there are any number of people who are very grateful and shower you with gratitude and all that. And there are a few, not many, but a few, quite ungrateful. So what do you do about that? Nothing. You look at it philosophically, you say, I'm not doing it to get gratitude. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. So it's very difficult, because you can't easily set that down. But I think it's at least a philosophy that one needs to accept. So that's what makes you sad sometimes. And there's a lot of sadness in my work. You see. So I'm no longer the very mischievous and the very sort of outgoing chap that I was when I was very young. All this, naturally preys upon you all the time. And even if you don't want to, you change. Automatically you start changing. You go to a blooming dinner and you think of big number 3, I don't know what's happening to me. I'm not able to understand why this is happening or what am I supposed to do. And there are people who are chatting and talking about rubbish, and what am I doing here? What am I doing here? I'm taking home, that sort of thing. That's the sort of thing also that happens. But that's not nice also. The great is the fellow, dissociate himself, do the same work and yet dissociate himself and not be sort of burdened by it to a great extent.
One last question. What is your philosophy on religion?
I'm a religious person. I really am a religious person. I do feel that there is some outside force which conducts this universe. It's not a man, obviously, it's not a woman, obviously. I think it's a force of some sort or the other from which this world emanates and which controls our destinies in some way or the other. My religion doesn't believe in karma, but I do believe in karma. I can't see any other explanation for this world. How can you expect children to suffer, innocent children to suffer and die and suffer also without having some explanation for that? I mean, nobody is going to prove it. But isn't it true that some people have been able to say what their past lives were? Isn't that so? I have read of people saying that they know what their past life and they've been able to go to that life and prove that this is where I was, this. I don't know how true it is, but it's possible, I think. But I'm very religious and I pray every single day. Before I go to work, I pray. I sometimes pray too fast. You can't. My wife says, how can you pray so much in 15 minutes? Impossible. What are you doing? So, but at least I pray. I don't ask anything always when you pray. You just thank God. That's it. If you ask God, give me this, give me that, give me a mercy. subsidies given to it. They're pointless. If you just thank God. And I pray sometimes for my patients. I always pray for my patients, every day.
And if you had to talk to a person or to the person's family who is dying, what counsel would you give them?
Oh, I sit down and talk. I sit down and I spend quite some time with them. And there is a side room to our. Normally I talk to the patients' relatives outside. When I walk through the door, to each group of them, I tell them what is happening at length, answer all the questions, and tell them the truth, the exact truth, what is happening. But when a person is really very bad, and there is a chance that he's going to die, there is a side room where I sit them down, and I tell them everything that is to be told, and answer all their questions, because they have always questions to ask. And tell them to be philosophic about it, that is life. That I can't do more than what I have done. I always give them the option, do you want anyone else to look at them? You tell me and I will get that person to look at them. Any other doctor to look at them, for example, or anything else you want that. Sometimes they ask the impossible and they say that's not worth it, that's not possible. It's not worth doing. Can I take him to America? He can't survive the journey to America.
But is there any philosophical kind of...
Yes, the philosophy is that, death is just part of life. I mean, everyone has to go. Everyone has the time. There is a time for everyone to go. And that is not just in our hands. You have to accept what is happening. It's a question of acceptance. It's tragic, it's sad, but you have to accept it and you have to move out. You have to. There's no other way. You just be as philosophical as you can. Not give them a lecture on philosophy, but just give them solace more than anything.
You said that you were mischievous as a child. Are you still mischievous?
No, I'm not mischievous now. I'm not mischievous now. There's no time to be mischief actually, if you ask me. I was mischievous right up to college, right into college, and up to college, right till I passed out. I finished my MD. In my quarters, I was a very mischievous place. I used to play the violin. Unfortunately, for the last 6 months, I can't. But I used to play the violin. And I remember in my quarters playing the violin on the roof, sloping like that, standing on the roof between the male hostel and the female hostel.
So literally fiddler on the roof.
Fiddler on the roof. Literally a fiddler on the roof. So all sorts of things. All sorts of things. Can you jump from the second floor? So I said, let me first try from the first floor. That was in school. So I jumped from the first floor. But when I went up to the second floor, I said, no, I didn't get good from here. But there was a boy who did. You won't believe it. There was a boy who said, I'll jump from this floor. And he did. And went up. Perfectly alright. Got up and went up. So those were the days we knew. But at home, of course, there was no real mischief. And when there was mischief, it had to be good mischief, otherwise you had it.
I think we've taken up a lot of your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Let me back into old memories.
You've been very, very patient.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.